Pequot sisters Martha Langevin and Elizabeth George Plouffe are widely credited with saving the very existence of the Mashantucket Pequot Indian Reservation by refusing to move off their land. The sisters' story is one of tenacity and sacrifice, the women living off the land for decades in order to save their ancestral home and their cultural heritage.
Where we're sitting, this Mashantucket Museum would not be here. Foxwoods would have never been built. There would have been no bingo. There would have been no community center. There would have been no housing. There would have been nothing. Zero, if it hadn't been for those two ladies.
The two of them lived off this land to hold this land for us. They both played separate roles. Matt's role was that she was a protector of the land here. And she always say, go do what you got to do. So if my grandmother had to go up to Hartford or wherever she had to do what she had to do, Matt, she said, I'll be sitting right here in this chair with her shotgun.
I don't think Matt's legacy or my grandmother's legacy would be even talked about if they didn't have one another. Because if they didn't, I think they would have, one of them would have had to have left.
Born on the reservation, Elizabeth in 1895 and Matt in 1901, the girls were half-sisters. Their mother, Martha Hoxie, who was of Pequot and Narragansett heritage, had 7 children with her first husband and Elizabeth's father, Cyrus George, who was Pequot. She then had 4 children with her second husband and Matt's father, French-Canadian Napoleon Langevin, who made his living for a time as a snake handler. Both girls were educated. Matt seen here in a school photo at nearby Cider Hill School in Ledyard, Connecticut.
They both had such a love for the land. Martha Langevin, she loved the animals and she just loved being on the reservation. She'd tell you about the berries and she hiked. Matt was the silly one and my grandmother was more the reserved one.
Elizabeth George had 7 children over her lifetime. When she married Arthur Plouffe, a steel worker, in 1930, they had 2 children together. Matt, who was previously married, never had children of her own. She was the beloved aunt who always took care of the young ones, while others went off the reservation to work. The sisters lived on their tribal lands, Elizabeth with her family in the ancestral house, and Matt on her own in a series of small structures over the years.
My grandmother had her gardens that she took care of, and Matt had hers. Matt's garden, right down below that ledge there, she had a planting there. They did a lot of canning. It was something that was handed down from the tribal ancestry. Neither one of those houses, Matt's house or my grandmother's, when I was young, had running water in it. And Matt's house never had electric. And it would get very cold in that house, ice cold. When I was a kid, it was a copperhead den. You couldn't walk 10 feet without seeing copperheads. Matt used to shoot them with her shotgun.
In 1935, governance over the reservation was transferred to the Connecticut Park and Forest Commission, which viewed the land as a state resource. Tribal members were not allowed to build new homes or even make home repairs without approval. White overseers were dispatched to the reservation to enforce their rules.
Well, when I was helping Matt build that shack, I remember overseer coming up in there. I said, "What the hell are you doing?" Because her roof was leaking. But they told her we couldn't build that shack, that we had no right to doing that, and not to do it and stop it immediately. And Matt was almost in tears over that. It was terrible, but we kept building it and we finished it.
In 1941, authority over the reservation was transferred to the Connecticut State Welfare Department, which ruled that when a tribal member died, they were not allowed to pass ownership of their house to their heirs. Instead, the home would be owned by the state. Tribal members were also forbidden to conduct any type of business on their land. By the 1960s, Elizabeth and Matt remained as the last 2 residents living on the approximately 200-acre reservation.
They had to endure being poor. They had to endure just living off the land and not going out and getting good jobs. They took minimal kinds of jobs and they just did about anything, whether it was babysitting, cleaning houses.
In 1968, local town officials came onto the reservation and arrested Elizabeth George Plouffe for not licensing her dogs. The charges were eventually dropped, but it was yet another incident in the long history of state infringement on tribal lands.
They're waiting for him just to die and go away, and then their plan was to turn this into a state park. My grandmother fought it. Her and Matt fought it. My grandmother was like the voice out there telling people over my dead body.
And that's when my grandmother, she called all of the kids. We had a meeting and that we needed to all get back on the reservation and do whatever it took to get back up there. And that's what we started to do. We lived in campers, we lived in trailers, and they told us we couldn't do it, and we pulled them anyway. They said we would be arrested, and we did it anyway.
In 1973, members of the 5 Native American tribes in Connecticut pushed for the creation of the Indian Affairs Council, finally giving them a voice in their own governance. Then, before her death in 1973, Elizabeth George Plouffe talked to her grandson, Skip Hayward, about the importance of his leadership for the survival of the reservation.
And my grandmother came down one day, and she wanted to know if I would be interested in representing the tribe at that point.
Skip Hayward was elected to the chairmanship of the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Council in 1975.
And we worked with the Connecticut Indian Affairs Council to try to improve conditions on the reservation.
Pequot tribal members worked within the established legal system to press their case for sovereignty. By 1976, they were in federal court to regain approximately 700 acres of their land illegally taken by the state of Connecticut in the 1800s, despite tribal petitions at the time. In 1977, Skip Hayward led an effort to establish the first tribal housing authority in the state, which resulted in the construction of 15 housing units. Tribal members began their own small businesses, including pig farming, vegetable and hydroponic gardening, maple syrup production, along with building a ball field named for the Pequot sisters' mother, Martha Hoxie.
He said he used it to get people to work together. It's to build the community. It wasn't to make money, because it kind of built the tribe back together.
Momentum for justice was gathering, which compelled Connecticut Governor William O'Neill to sign legislation in favor of the tribe over land settlement issues. The biggest legal battles were won in 1983, when the tribe received federal recognition and won their land claim case, which awarded the tribe $900,000 to buy back more than 1,000 acres of their land over time. With federal recognition came the right to begin a gaming operation. Their high-stakes bingo hall opened in 1986 to wild success.
Those 2 women held on to this land, or we wouldn't have this museum. That's what they gave to us, is for us to be able to tell this story that wouldn't have been told, and all this history would have been lost.
The $193 million Mashantucket Pequot Museum and Research Center, with over 300,000 square feet, includes a permanent exhibit telling the story of the sisters' fight to save the reservation, complete with a replica of Matt's cabin. There are other tributes to the sisters on the now over 1,600-acre reservation, which includes the Foxwoods Resort Casino, 135 housing units, a tribal court, fire, emergency, and health services, a tribal police department, public works, housing and education departments, a water treatment plant, as well as a child development center. Today, the Mashantucket Pequot tribe is a thriving community of over 1,000 members. All of this success built on the shoulders of 2 courageous women who were indeed a force of nature.
I have so much respect for what they did. The benefits we're seeing with the monies in these buildings, it wasn't for free. Someone suffered and paid the price.
They left us our heritage, our culture, that we wouldn't have today if it wasn't for them. They gave us a strength, I think, that they passed on to us. They gave you that you could do anything, because you knew they did, that you could do it too.